Good afternoon. We are very glad that you're joining us today for this session. And just to welcome you to our today's session, that is session 10. We are going to be discussing open results part 2. And our host is Graciel, and I'll be your facilitator for today. And our expert will be Daniela. And we are very happy to have you. Just to share with you the link to the framer pad where we can be noting our names, so we can add either W or S. This will help us to know whether you, especially if you are having the breakout room, whether we will allocate you to the writing breakout room or the speaking breakout room. Just some of the ground rules. This call is being recorded and transcribed, and we welcome you to turn up your webcam if you don't mind. Then this video will also be available via our YouTube channel. That is also, you can check it later if you need to follow the recordings. And then the captions are available by clicking the double C button on the on the Zoom platform. And just a code of conduct, we encourage everyone to participate and be committed. Just be considerate and respectful because there are a majority. This is a worldwide community, and you might not be communicating in someone's primary language. And if you experience or witness any acceptable behavior or have any other concern, you can report this to our organizers, and you can reach out directly to our host, that's Graciel. You can check the email addresses in the form pad. And then to report any issue involving any of the organizers, you can also email Graciel or Sarah via the provided email address. And then we would like you to indicate besides your name whether it is written or it is spoken. This will help us just to allocate you in the breakout room. And so we just need to welcome you for today's event, and we are very happy to join you. We would like to see you participating, and you can also be engaging in the Framapad section. And thank you very much. We are very happy to have you today. And back to you, Daniela. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this introduction. And hi again, everyone. It's great to see you and be with you today. My camera, for some reasons, goes off on its own after a certain amount of time. I haven't figured out why and how I can prevent that. But at some point, my camera will go off, and it's not because I wanted to do it. It's just that's what it does. And sometimes I won't necessarily realize it as I'm presenting. Okay, so we gonna go start sharing. I put the link to my slides in the Pad, and so these are also slides that have been put on Zenodo. So if you search for this DOI, you'll have the deck available there in both PDF and PowerPoint. And the slide deck is licensed CC by 4.0, so it is available for reuse as much as you want. Okay, I know that I'm always the last one here, which is just great. Like, oh, it's time to share your open results, and I stand between before graduation. So I feel like it's an honor. You've already gone through so much, so congratulations already for being here. So just a teeny bit about me. My name is Daniela. I also go by Dani. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the executive director and co-founder of Pre-Review. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pre-Review at the very end. Some of you already know. Some of you already collaborate and are partners of Pre-Review. I know at least one person in here. And I have a background in neuroscience. So here on the far left, it's me in the lab. I'm Italian, and I came to the United States in Portland, Oregon, where I still live, back in 2012 to pursue a PhD in neuroscience. And then halfway through it, I discovered the open scholarship, open science community. So more than the principles, really what got me into this space is the people. And so two of still my favorite people are the Pre-Review co-founders, Samantha Hindle and Monica Granados, who are in the photo in the middle. And they're still active advisory board members of Pre-Review. That photo is just a beautiful photo of Portland, where I live now. And I'm really happy to be with you all today. So I'm gonna start by just asking this question, and I really like the icebreaker. It's very appropriate to today's discussion. Like, when do you share your research? When I open up with these questions, like just not just when, but also where and how do we share our research? And this, apologize, a couple of them are very pixelated. There's not a lot of like importance of what images here, but it was just to track the fact that from the kind of science, the way that most of us know it, perhaps, or how we've been taught, and the way the research used to be shared, it starts much earlier than the written word. It starts knowledge sharing, and is very much has been shared through storytelling, through history. But like if we can track back on when it became like more obvious of an exchange to get feedback and opinions, perhaps to let other colleagues know, an example is like when letters were exchanged. But then as we fast forward, with the advent of journals, of course, the publication became more of instead of just an exchange between two or a few scientists that were doing similar things, it became possibly more accessible to at least other scientists that might not have had the same, knowing the mail address of the other person. But the point here is that the way that we communicate science has evolved in different ways. And I think we should think about sharing research is just beyond just the publication, right? It's every time we have a chat with a colleague on the hall, when we present our posters at a conference. And the internet has also massively changed the way that we share knowledge. There are certain things that remain pretty similar, but more than like kind of trying to figure out when and where and how we should have research, I like to go back to the why. Why did we go back to? Why did we come to become researchers in the first place? Before I open up the discussion for that question, I also want to mention that, as I kind of alluded already, is that a lot of what we're discussing today, it is going to refer primarily to what I've been taught as like the scientific way, like the more academic and Western way of sharing knowledge. But as I mentioned, knowledge has been and continues to be shared in many different ways, through storytelling and through oral dissemination. And also, what is knowledge is something that at least some parts of the open science movement challenges from perspectives of many different cultures. And so I want to acknowledge that there are the traditional knowledge, and indigenous knowledge is also knowledge, and it is knowledge that is important to inform scientific advancement of humanity and as a whole. So even though it's not the processes we're talking about today is not centered here, I want to acknowledge that this is absolutely part of what knowledge dissemination is about. So the first activity is just reflecting a little bit on the why. When I find myself kind of trying to figure out how to navigate across all of the things that I do, I love asking, like, why am I even doing this? Like maybe 5 times. But I'm wondering, like many of you, I should probably consider yourself as a researcher in different, even if it's not necessarily like a scientist that works at the bench. But all of us research, right, in some way. And I'm wondering, like, what motivates you? What has motivated you in the first place to enter the path that you entered? So maybe let's just take a couple of minutes on the frame pad to share a little bit about why we got into this path of being researchers. And I am going to, can I share the frame pad? Maybe I can. No. It's not helping. I can't get out of presentations mode. I should, why? I want to make sure that I can actually see what you're typing. There you go. Also, feel free to use the chat. So here we go. Up here, some of you shared, when do you share your research? When my coworkers are bored of listening to me. That's funny. When I've looked at it for so long, I start circling back on the revisions. But let's just, we're going to talk about the when and the how in a bit. But again, just thinking about what motivate you to share your research and to share knowledge with others. And feel free to unmute if you'd like to share vocally. I realized that I posed the question a little bit differently than this one. I asked, like, why did you get into research? Which is even before the question of why you shared research. So take whatever flavor of question sparks the best response for you. I see here. No, I'll give a more seconds before I start commenting. As you're still typing, there's definitely some themes that you can already see emerge, which are not surprising, that we will share what we discover, or it's not even discover, but like, the fruits of our research with others, because we want to, some of us really would like to get feedback and sharing with others so that it can be corroborated. So like the aspect of getting feedback from others is a big motivator. But I think the other theme that to me is even before that is the fact that if we don't share our research, what's the point of doing it anyway, right? I think a lot of us, and again, I'm assuming, but we got into becoming scientists or whatever flavor of researcher you are, because we want to contribute to knowledge. And if we don't share it, then there is no way for what we spend time doing and thinking to be the substrate for someone else's research. So it's a continuous, hopefully we're always moving forward. Maybe sometimes we take a couple of steps back as a society, but we are moving forward as a community. And so if we don't share it, then we're not going to be able to enable that growth. I also love to share the joy of discovery. I think that joy is incredibly underrated in research. We should have just a course on how to center joy in all our work as researchers. I think that would change a lot of things. But thank you for sharing, and please continue to write. This is just the reason why I bring up this question is to then go back, now that we kind of focus a little bit on why we share our research, how and when we do it. And so if the motivator is to get feedback, if the motivator is to build upon, to make sure that what we have found can be reused, then the current way of sharing research is not a good solution. So this is just what could be called a research cycle. It's actually a line, but it's just representing probably just not even all of the steps, of what a traditional kind of idea of mostly scientific research cycle could go. could go by when like you have that first ideation that very likely doesn't come from out of nowhere. It comes from other people, other works that came before us. And then we ask new questions, or maybe people ask a similar question in a different way. And then, we're sometimes asked to write a proposal, we plan the research and so on and so forth. But, between that and then the time that we actually share it with everybody else, it's like it's a big cloud. Like it's not transparently shared. We do not share all of those processes with others, maybe with other co-workers, maybe in a presentation in the department, but largely research is shared at the very end. And so that makes it really hard to actually go back to fulfill that why. And it makes it delays the time that others can build upon our research, it delays the opportunity or prevents opportunities for earlier collaborations. And the other point is that even when it's shared at the end, a lot of times the research is actually not available to everyone. So the research outputs are not openly available in a way that would fulfill that why. The other point here is that the feedback part, right? So if we don't share all of these pieces as they come, we also don't get that opportunity to get earlier feedback that could adjust our direction, perhaps at a point in time in which would still make sense to adjust our direction so earlier on. So that peer review and that feedback happens only primarily at the very end when the research publication is. So I want to take before I go back into talking about open access, I want to take a minute to discuss peer review. And there are many definitions of peer review. This is one of Wikipedia. I imagine that many of you are familiar with what peer review is. But it's often, so it's a process that is supposed to function as a self-regulation. So when we can get feedback from peers, question who are the peers, we can, and our research is like in a way like legitimized because others have evaluated and possibly people that have less stakes into it because it's not us. And then they have expertise relevant to the field. But the way that, again, that process works, primarily, the most traditional way of peer review is that you actually don't really know what's up. You submit your manuscript to a journal, and then editorial process finds some reviewers. Most of the time you don't know who they are, how they're found, how they're selected, and then you have to wait a month of time before you know if that paper will be accepted or rejected. So it's often defined as a black box. And the other aspect of peer review that it's actually what motivated me to get into this business is that it is a process that is actually feared. And so many of you described that why, and I think it became that why of receiving feedback. And I don't think it's because that the desire of getting feedback is great. Like I want to be in a world in which I'm open to receiving feedback because I know that the feedback that is going to come to me comes from a place of care, comes from a place of I want to actually help you because by helping you, I help also my why, which is contributing to knowledge. But the reality is that this peer review process is often feared. And it's depicted, this is one of the most commonly used images for peer review, really like almost entering a battle, right? When the researcher is entering this like tunnel of armed people and there is literally death at the end. And, that means like you're going to be slashed, the concept of publish or perish that is very commonly associated with academia. This image also has other kind of emotions that could come up for me, which is, the researcher comes in, it's completely unarmed. Everybody is depicted with kind of similar skin tone, so and looking kind of more senior than you would expect. And I think that also represents a very real factor of what peer review is that it is very homogeneous group of people who review research that comes from a very heterogeneous space in the world. So if we look at some data, and unfortunately, because peer review is a black box, we actually don't know exactly the reality of the situation, but we can guess. And also, if from some data, this is a little bit outdated. There are more works out there that I should bring into these numbers, but they haven't changed that much. Which is that the the outset of the identity of the reviewers. So gatekeepers in these papers are actually looking at reviewers and editors is skewed. And again, it's from a very homogeneous group of people. So in this particular studies, they show that 75% were men. 92% of the editors and reviewers, mostly reviewers for these studies, came from North America and Europe, with I think less than 2% coming from collectively the African continent, which is, I think, is appalling. And of course, this was from a journal that is it's a eLife, which is a journal based in the UK, but it is a journal that serves a broad research output. So there is a mismatch between the research that's published and who is actually reviewing, and truly gatekeeping has the power to share the research or not. And not very many, 67% of the early career researchers that were interviewed in this study had not experienced in peer review. So there's also that aspect of we don't actually have training or opportunities for early career researchers to engage in peer review, but then you're suddenly expected to be able to do it and to know how to do it when you have a certain number of publications so that an editor can discover that you exist. If there are any comments or thoughts, please do share in the chat. But Gracielle or someone who noticed, let me know, because I can't see the chat at the moment. So going back to the process of when review happens, in the standard cycle of publication, the review happens at the very end, at the review of the manuscript of the research. But there has been more and more, especially in the recent years, a push for getting clarity of that cloud. So really making sure that we can share our research as it is planned, and it is proposed, for example, for a grant or to our department. So all of those pieces of the research that come before the research manuscript, that is kind of a summary in the end, if you think about, are actually shared continuously, and the review is also continuously provided. This is just a figure from the life cycle journals, which is a project by the Center for Open Science that is actually coming to an end. It's a pilot that has been lasting for 2 years, when they're actually taking a subset of research manuscripts and testing these ideas of what it would look like to get continuous reviews and have everything, all of these pieces published in their own merit as shareable research objects. And so this is an idea that right now you may hear some talk about as a modularity of research sharing. So you share pieces of research, and each piece can get its own review. And it's less about getting someone, 1 or 2 people that I decided they're right, but more about the research is out there and the community can come and provide feedback to that bit in a way that can help the researchers kind of along the way, rather than a rush to review a manuscript of research that is already done. So then if we start thinking about, this modularity, this each one of those pieces of research take its own, it's shared independently. We also may imagine how we start becoming even more of an issue of how do we track all of these pieces? How do they stay connected in a way that then someone, if I'm, writing a thesis or whoever, a reader can actually then make sense of all of that, all of that process. And so this is where it becomes extremely important that as a community, we work on making sure that these objects are trackable and they're connected to one another and they're, findable. And so persistent identifiers are, and there are many, many different flavors, but there are ways to track independent objects. And here I was going to ask for you all to define persistent identifier, but I'm just going to skip that. The definition of a persistent identifier is, again, I love Wikipedia, so I always take the definitions from there. But it's a unique code. It could be numbers and letters, different combinations that points to only one object. It's there is no other object that could be that relates to that code, specific code. And that is not only for research objects, it is for, for sure it is for like pieces of data sets, software, the publications. You have seen DOIs, the digital object identifiers, issued by different groups, Crossref and DataCite being some of the most common that I hear about. But there is also identifiers for organizations. There is identifiers for people. I'm imagining a lot of you already know ORCID, and if you don't have an ORCID identifier, go and get it. It is incredibly helpful to have a way to point uniquely to you, and for credit and for, again, trackability all over these objects that are published. And there's IDs for funding and many others. So it's many IDs that we can produce. And then the challenge is to associate the right metadata and to make sense of all of these objects and how they're connected in an increasingly complex path. So it's nice when you have maybe one final piece, but then it's easier, I guess. But then it is also, prevents all of the other things we talked about. So I think, again, as we evolve with new pieces, it's important that we keep track of them. And so now I have a little quiz. Yeah, we have a little quiz in the frame pad, which is to find the intruder. This is just hopefully like a break from me talking. But there's this 4 identifier or 4 links or whatever you want to call them. And one of them is not a persistent identifier. And so I wonder if you can use the chat or in the frame pad and guess. I mean, there is a wrong answer, but also it's okay. Nobody's actually testing you. I guess it's more about thinking about what is a persistent identifier and what's not. So I'm going to exit and go to the frame pad. Where are we? There we go. So, there's 111. So use the chat to say what you think is not a persistent identifier. And where is my chat? I lost the chat. The GitHub link. Could the repo, name be changed? Okay, Stephen, you got the right answer. The GitHub link, it is not a persistent identifier. In fact, not just the name of the repo, the content of the repository can be easily found, be easily changed. And so that means that that link can also disappear. Maybe the repo gets completely taken away. So it will not always point to the same object. That's right. I'm going to take a pause to drink some water. Does anyone want to share any thoughts so far in the chat or unmute? A lot of you may have known all of this already, which is very possible. So apologies for that. Okay. So
do you mind if I?
Yeah,
sorry,
please,
do you mind
Stephen,
if I
go ahead.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
just ask a quick question. So you had a bunch of persistent identifiers there on that kind of little diagram on the page before. Is there like a convergence towards these ones in those particular activity buckets, or like, I'm just thinking of the idea that like you always have to get a new account for everything. And so is there lots of different persistent identifiers such that you end up with 12 different ORCID ID type things referencing you, or you have a Crossref account and a DataCite account, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. You don't need a Crossref account with your own identifier to get cross. Like, I think, so ORCID, I definitely recommend to have one ORCID and not multiple ORCID, because that would be confusing. But I think that if, for example, one thing that is important to say is like, if you, for example, pre-review, we decided from the very beginning to use ORCID as the way to create a profile, because it's, having, this is why, I think it's important that we converge as a community on also making it easier, because the space is so vast. And choosing what's the right one versus what's not. I remember at the time people were like, oh, but anyone can have an ORCID ID, right? You can make an ORCID ID with your Gmail, with whatever email, and it doesn't necessarily connect to your academic. And I was like, that is exactly why we picked ORCID, right? Because I do want anyone to be able to review and, in a way that is constructive. But so I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of people are trying to choose, and to make consistent so that like a researcher doesn't have to go into 300 million places to do it. But for the other ones, it's I believe, for example, pre-review has a ROR, so an ID for the organization, but I didn't have to make a separate account that would point to a separate object. So I don't know if I answered your question, but like also Crossref, like if you publish, for example, a preprint, you put your ORCID ID, but then Crossref will take the metadata and catalog and they get the DOI associated to your ORCID, but you don't have to do anything. One thing that you are asking to do through ORCID is perhaps like if you want to have adding automatically the output, so the DOI associated with Crossref or DataCite, if you wanted to be added to your ORCID profile. So there is like this API integration also for pre-review. So I think some of these different buckets talk to each other. Do they do it in the most efficient way? Not always, but I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, it sounds like there is some convergence and some kind of like the buckets. Yeah, talking to other.
And there are new, like I think VeryMe is actually the same person that founded ORCID. That started a year ago or so, VeryMe, which is a similar like for identity. So that would be, if you have a VeryMe and an ORCID, what happens? And I think that they are also converging. They're trying to, it's the same account, but what VeryMe does is like additional verification. So I think people that are in this space are at least trying to align on what they do so that you don't create replicas of, especially of yourself, because the whole point of a PID is it points to one thing. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. So now we're going to talk about open access. And so, when going back to the initial kind of research cycle, at the very end, okay, we publish our research, but even when we publish our research, the default is not open. And for many, at least it definitely wasn't when I started learning about open science, but the open access movement has been going on for 25 plus years. And I just want to also mention that as there have definitions, there are so many different definitions of open access. Open access is just a branch of a broader open science, open scholarship movement, where everything has a word open at the beginning, but it can mean different things. The word open itself, you can spend hours just debating on what open actually means. For open access it really aims at making scholarly literature, scholarly research outputs freely accessible, so free of charge for consuming that piece of research, and reusable by everyone. So some people are very specific about something is open access only if it can be reused, which then we get into the space of talking about licenses, which I wasn't trained. I remember learning about licenses and copyright, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Nobody tells me as a researcher how to choose a license. I didn't even know that I had to choose a license. So a lot of, I think, of the space of like publishers and how they operate so far is that they rely also on the fact that the researchers often don't know that they're actually giving away the rights to their own research. But the monetary aspect has been the one that has been most obvious to everyone. So how many people have found paywalls? Like you want to read a piece of research, you can't unless you pay. And that is definitely not open, right? That's the closed access, and what the open access movement has been focusing a lot on removing as a barrier. So the cost to access or to read the research object. And so many policies and have been evolving to kind of getting to that goal of making it freely accessible to people to look at. And so the goal of open access is the main model that has, I would say, that has been taken up by publishers, or also supported by funders, and things are changing. And what that means is that instead of the reader paying to read the review, to read the research objects, so the manuscript, now the cost has shifted to the authors. So if you want to make your research open, which also has been linked to more citations, obviously, because if some other people can read your research, that they can also cite it more, they can build upon, right? Going back to the why, that's of course we want our research to be openly available so that others can be impacted by it, can build on it. And so if you as an author really want to stick to your why and say, okay, yes, I want it to be open and publishing in a journal, then the main solution that has been put out is that you pay for it. So someone's got to pay in this capitalistic world, right? And so then the fee is shifted to the authors. And then, the journal will say, well, if you pay, then yes, sure, we'll give it an open license. And even here, not everybody does it in the same way. But the truth is that there are many other paths to that open access, as we defined it, that have been called in different ways. And we're not going to go through all of them. But my favorite path is the green way, which is it doesn't cost to you to publish, it doesn't cost to the reader. And it's the author's choice to assign a license, or maybe the preprint server choice, depending on where you publish. But it's the repository, the way of self-archiving your own research. And I'm going to show that path in a minute. Are there any questions about all of these different? It doesn't really matter. I mean, how they're called, but one that it's been also taking on, and I have just participated to the Diamond Open Access Summit back in February, where Carolina also was there, is this movement to, again, like to take the open access path in a different ways, even through journals, where actually there are no fees for publishing open and there are no fee to be read. But that also raises the question of like, how do you sustain a journal without, where does the funding come from to actually sustain operations of a journal? And I think that what the Diamond Open Access movement is much more than asking only these questions about payment. It's actually asking questions about what knowledge are we even producing, multilingualism. I really invite you all to check out the report that came out of the Diamond Open Access. I can put the link later. It's a much broader discussion, but for now, just to say the Diamond Open Access is still not at the level of Gold Open Access in terms of our adoption, but there is a movement of people who are really trying to make Diamond Open Access the mainstream. So there are tools that help you navigate all of this chaos, because as a researcher, like I work in this space, and then I remember like, I don't have time to understand all of this. Every month there is a new policy, a new someone who brings up a new idea, a new platform to do something. And so there are thankfully some tools that have been put out to help you as a researcher navigate this space and make informed decisions on where you're publishing your research. And if you, for example, the OAJ, which we're going to go over today in breakout room, it's a directory of open access journals, and it's a space where you can look up at a directory of open access journals. They have thousands of journals that are listed there, and they present you with very specific information about the cost, but also the license, the policy of the journal, and so on. And then there is also tools like the Open Policy Finder, formerly was Sharpa Romeo, and Sharpa Juliet. This is a tool to help you navigate the open access policy of a funder, but also journals. So they have expanded this tool to be about funders and publishers. So you can search in this finder and find additional information about what is their open access policy. And similarly, there are also efforts to help you make your research open access in your own terms. OA Works is a tool that helps you make your research open access after you publish. So they try to find legal ways to, oftentimes to self-archiving, to put your research and make it available, even when you have already published it, perhaps in a non-open access journal. So check it out. It's a great tool that is evolving every month. And then, of course, there's a preprint. So you can post your own preprint. And that's, I think, to me, is still the easiest way towards open access. But again, different journals have different policies. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, so now I'd like to spend the next 15, 20 minutes exploring this DOAJ tool. So the activity we're going to do today is that I put in the frame pad, and it's the same here on the screen. You're going to be in breakout rooms and different, I think can we do 4? Or if we cannot do 4, we can do 3. And we just pick your own favorite of this list. You can also try your own, another journal. It doesn't have to be this. These are just simple examples. And then you copy and paste the name of the journal into the DOAJ search and follow the instructions. And we can also do it together at the end. But what I would like to encourage you is to try to follow these prompts and then see what you get out of it. There is no better way to kind of explore a tool than actually testing it on your own. And then we have these couple of questions. It's like, okay, does the journal have APCs, which are these author processing charges, where the authors have to pay to publish? Do the authors retain copyright of their work? See if you can find answers to these questions in the DOAJ output. And yeah, this one is optional. There is, going back to connections between tools, DOAJ also connects to Open Policy Finder. You can also get additional information about policy by clicking there, but we don't have to do it all. So now I don't know if breakout groups and how they are created, if they've been created already, but if we go to thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you can. Breakout room 1 can do eLife, but again, I'm not super. You can choose another open access journal. These are just some that I tested and I know that they work. So, but the DOAJ has thousands and thousands of open access journal in there. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and I'll let the organizers create those rooms. And you're welcome to, when you go to the room, please remember to introduce yourself. If you're using the spoken word, if you're using the written, you just write in the Etherpad. But if you're sharing openly, just make sure that you leave space for everyone to engage. And I think we can give 7 to 10 minutes.
Okay, right. I was going to double check that because I heard you said 20 minutes.
Well, sorry, but in general, we're going to come back and then discuss, right? No, yeah.
Okay, so giving 10 minutes and opening the rooms now.
And if there are any questions, please let us know. You can also use the help button and one of us will come there. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I know for some of you, this was what you already knew. Maybe I hope that you still discovered something you didn't know in this little exploration. I wonder if anyone from Zoom room 1 would like to share. And again, if this group doesn't want to share openly, that's okay. We can also look at the frame pad together. Anyone from group 1, 2, or 3 would like to share what it was like?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Jorley. I was in group 1 alongside Maite, Oyosinki, and Steven. And we were responsible for searching the eLife journal. We used the website that you provided, and from what we could gather, they have been in fully open access journal since 2013. And they do have a fee regarding regarding if the scientists do want to publish it open access, the APC, and we found that it is $3,000. And we did find particularly speaking, the site that you provided was quite useful since these information were quite, easy to find. So I'll be using that later. And regarding the access, the site explicits that the journal allows the researchers, the authors, to retain our rights, and maybe by a CC BY license or CC0 from what I could gather. And we also tried to find information on the preprint question that you put in there, but we did not find any specifics about that. They provide a self-archiving policy for the Open Policy Finder. And I think that's it mostly for me. If any of my colleagues want to share something else, please feel free. But
Thank you so much. This is very interesting. Actually, I think that also like there is the need to update. In DOAJ does a pretty good job, but the eLife has been only reviewing preprints for the last 2 or 3 years. They changed that model. So the policy about preprints is that if it's not a preprint, they won't publish it. So they actually only review preprints, and they change the way that they accept. So there is no longer like, oh, you will be accepted or rejected based on review. If they say this is a preprint that is of interest to the eLife journal, it has to be like life science and the research they publish, they will go on and do review and publish the reviews on the preprints. And then if you still want to have, and it's all public, and if you still want to publish within eLife, then you pay the APC, and they do formatting and other curation. It's still a golden open access model in that way, like there is a author processing fee, but from the preprint perspective with eLife, it should be very clear. I think in the OAJ page, that's what they do, but so they need to update. Interesting, you couldn't find specification on that. And I think you're right, because I looked it too and it wasn't there. So thank you. Anyone from group 2? We're going to have a break after this, so hang on for a couple more minutes. Group 2 was had the South African Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, which the reason why I put it in there because I had read some articles from that journal when we did a partnership with the OBGYN groups. Seems like there are notes in here. The journal does have APCs 7,000. Well, but it's dark. Okay, I was like 7,500 ZAR, which I don't know how much that is, if that's a lot or not. And the authors return copyrights by CCNC, which is non-commercial. So you are allowed to reshare, but in a non-commercial way. It's a very common license. That makes some researchers feel more protected from extraction. Can you still hear me? I feel like I lost. Oh, there you go. Anyone from room 3? Okay. Room 3 was the history of geo and space sciences. The journal does not have an APC, so this is a Diamond Open Access journal. I assume I haven't read this in a long time. And the authors retain or restricted copyright through CC BY, and the Open Policy Finders provide additional information about self-archiving. And there is publisher articles can be deposited on any site by the author, so that they are open to preprints. Most journals in the life sciences right now are preprint friendly. And again, some only review preprints. And then actually there was a breakout room 4. Anyone from breakout room 4? Instead of me reading, and then we can take 5 minutes together. It's yes. So same thing for journal current research in neurobiology. This is actually the reason I put it in here was the journal we had a partnership with. It does have an APC. It's actually part of the Elsevier group, and the authors can choose open access Creative Commons licenses. It seems like,
That's the end right there, actually.
oh, sorry, this is my husband yelling. Okay, I will not stay in between now and the 5-minute break. So let's take 5 minutes. We'll be back at the 7 minute of the hour, actually the 8th minute of the hour. And then we can come back for the last little bit of this session. So thank you all so much for participating in this breakout room. See you in 5 minutes. Ready? Maybe react with something, with an emoji so that I know you're back. Yay, hello. Okay, we're gonna go through, I love emojis. Throw them at your pleasure throughout the presentation. Okay, we are going to finish up. Actually, sorry, before I start sharing, let me change so that you don't see my email. That is probably not what we want to share anyway. Okay. We go. Okay, so the last 20 minutes together. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about preprints because it's literally they are the reason why I moved away from academia and really thought that there was a space for me to start shaping some of the change that the open science movement was doing. I'm curious how many here know something about preprints, so maybe you posted a preprint. If you want to share in the chat, what is your experience with preprints? So it could be you posted, you read the preprint, or maybe you know nothing about preprints. Kind of curious to see. I know at least one person who knows a lot about preprints, because working literally at a preprint server. Oh, Caroline, I see your observation. You have never used JISC before. Yeah, it's I used to use it when it was called Open Romeo or Sherpa Romeo, but I do like their new offerings. Okay, anyone who'd like to share anything about preprints, you can also unmute. Nothing. Okay. Well, I love it. A lot of times these days, I take for granted that people know about what preprints are. So I learned first time about preprints in 2016 from my very first conference. It was called OpenCon, one of the best conferences I've ever been to. 63 different countries represented in an early career research focused conference. And one of the presentations was by Dr. Jessica Polka, who at the time was the executive director of SAP Bio, which is an organization that if you want to learn about preprints, you go to sapbio.org. I have some slides, you learn a lot there. But these preprints are scientific manuscripts that are complete to whatever, the word complete is funny because it's like, when is something complete? But it's like the same basically content that you would submit to a journal that is published in a preprint server. And a preprint server that started publishing preprint is the very first one is the archive, spelled AR, and then there's like a K, like a long Greek, not K, X, IV. The archive was the very first preprint server in 1991. So, let's use it. Now we have the internet. Why should we wait to have the research published through a journal publication system that can take months? And when we can actually share it and we don't need to ask for permission, we can just put it out there. And so the archive was founded in 1991, and it took until I think about 2014 for the life sciences to start catching up and using preprint server, and it's still a largely underused way of sharing research. But this image that can look complicated, but I love Scriberia. They have done a lot of great images about open science concepts as part of the Turing Way project. What it's illustrating is that preprints are a path to open access. And so if you remember earlier when we had all those different flavors of open access policy, there was gold and diamond and abrid and bronze. There was a green OA route, which is that self-archiving. It's no cost to you, it's no cost to the reader, and the research is available in hours to the entire world. And it's often open access, even in the sense of licensing. That's not true for every preprint server, but most preprint servers prioritize open licenses, or they only have that as an option. So, in this scheme, like you have your research, you're packing your results, you can submit that to a preprint server. There's many different ones we're going to see. And then you can still submit your research for peer review in the traditional path. And again, those tools, the OAJ, Open, was that Open? Man, I keep forgetting the name. The Finder, the Open Policy Finder. I can't. I'm very bad with names. Can help you navigate what's the policy around preprints for the specific journal you want to submit to. But most journals in the life sciences now are very open to that. When I started, I remember there were a lot of concerns about plagiarism, like journals thinking that that's already published, and so therefore I won't publish your manuscript. And we're going to look at some of those concerns in a minute. But really, let's look at like the preprint publishing versus the traditional journal publication. This is not to say that they are adversary, like they can coexist and very often do. Preprints, I think 84% of all preprints actually end up being published. So it's not an or, but it is a when question. So, and how. So in the traditional journal publishing process, you take your manuscript and you're finally ready to submit it to a journal, and then 2 or 3 reviewers that are often, and again, this is the more traditional one, selected opaquely, like it's a black box. We actually don't know who the reviewer are, how they're selected, why the editor selected them versus others. We'll review your manuscript and they can say, actually, no, reject. And then you have to repackage your manuscript, send it to another journal. And then a few other reviewers will review it, and 2 say yes, and 1 says, meh, you got to revise all of this stuff. And then maybe you'll revise and take more months, more time to revise it, submit it again. And if you're lucky, they'll be published. If you're not, you go on to the next one. So it's like this process can take, it's strenuous, it's a loss of, I think, time. Anyway, there's definitely improvement, right? That I imagine it can happen. But the problem is that while that happens, your research sits in the private dark space and it's not shared. So by the time it's shared, it can take months or years. And then even when it's shared, we saw that it's not necessarily true that then it could be actually consumed by others, because then it could be locked behind a paywall if you didn't choose an open access path, maybe because you couldn't spend $3,000 or $13,000 US for some publishers to make it openly available. So the preprints kind of cut a lot of that and say, hey, your manuscript is out there. Most preprint servers will have some light, making sure that you're not writing that you can cure cancer by drinking coffee. There is some legitimacy or like some sort of like process that is there, and then it will put it out there on the preprint server within hours. And so what that allows, it actually unlocks a lot of possibilities. And we're going to see one of them, which is now you can actually get a lot more feedback from a lot more people and sooner in the process. Preprints publishing grows pretty steadily. I didn't update this to the latest month, but Society provides an updated version of this figure where you can see these are not all preprint servers existing. There are, in fact, many missing there. But especially after the pandemic, it became obvious to more people that research should be shared at a much faster pace so that we can actually benefit from it and faster grow knowledge in a faster pace. And this is also just a publication that I put there because it's useful to also see how this trend is similar across, the trend is similar across continents, but definitely the percentage is different. These are not huge percentages, right? And this dip has also changed a little bit at the time as it was in 2013. There was seems like preprints were going down, but the truth is that they're still being published, more and more. And I just presented this without going one by one, but I love to hear, these are some of the most common benefits and concerns of preprints, and I'm putting, them next to each other because I think the most common benefit is they're free to read. They increase your visibility. They can increase your visibility of your research. In fact, there are studies that have shown that if you posted your research as a preprint, you get more citations because preprints are citable. They get the DOI that is unique to them. And there's a lot of work in also tracking that every next version. So their version, you can publish another version, will have DOIs that stay connected to the through the version. But also this opportunity for early feedback is perceived as a benefit, but it's also perceived as a concern by others, right? The fact that preprints are not officially peer-reviewed is a concern because of especially, right now, I think with AI, how can I trust that that's real research if someone has not vetted it? The truth, if you ask me, is that actually with preprints, you can have more eyes on it and much quicker than relying on a dark process of a journal that selected 2 reviewers to make sure that your review is real. I wonder if anyone would like to share concerns that you have that are not listed here or benefits of preprints and maybe are not listed here. There is chat. Let me check the chat. I usually share the first draft of my manuscript as a preprint to receive feedback from other researchers and my friends, which helped me improve the second, third subset. Oh, this is amazing that you do that. I love that. I hope you'll consider requesting feedback from the peer review community. I'd love to provide. I'll provide feedback to that. I learned about preprints last year. Must be a great way to learn and assess and share knowledge. Great. Okay. So where to preprint? This is another thing. As everything, it can become daunting about where should I put my research? And there are so many different preprint servers that represent different geographical regions. Carolina here is from Cielo Preprints. Cielo Preprints has been around for a long time as part of also the Cielo effort that I think last year was your 25 years around, if not more. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carolina, but there are so many, and that is primarily serving research in Latin America, but it's actually global, and they have research primarily. I think most of the preprints there are published in Portuguese. There is also Spanish and English. Love Cielo preprints, but there are also many other preprints. So how do you know which one is the right one for you? Again, there's the tool here, that's a biopreprint server directory that can help you find which one, what is the topic, if there is a topic that is specific for the preprint server, and maybe other considerations such as what license do they have. Now that you know about licenses a little bit, I didn't actually explain licenses, but you may also decide that you only want to share your research in an open license. So some preprint servers will have very clear open licenses and some won't. So there are different things that you can consider. So that is a clickable object in the pre-review, in the slides, if you would like to go check it. So a lot of what I love about the open science movement is that it's bottom up. It's people who say, I want change, and they try to provide services. This is not always, but to change the system. And it's up to the researchers to adopt them or not. And sometimes researchers, we're so busy. I remember vaguely what it was like. I don't know how to keep track of all of this. And it does help some top-down also policy change to kind of incentivize behaviors. Although, again, I'm a big fan of not on the stick, but on the carrot. So actually giving things, positive things for rewarding people for what they do. But some funders are increasingly changing their policy to actually ask the preprints are mandatory, to make preprints publication mandatory. So the Gates Foundation, for example, if you're funding from them, you will be required to put a preprint. Same thing for ASAP. HHMI, it's a research institution, it's not really a funder, but all their HHMI researchers are required to put out a preprint, and they don't even care if you publish afterwards. They just want to see a second version of the preprint after peer review, and peer review can happen anywhere. So there are changes in the perception also from the funder perspective of actually mandating preprints because they are supporting of open access and the open science movement. And ESA Bio is another link, has a really nice directory also of policy framework around major funders that have contributed to this, that have changed the policy to embrace preprint. Another tool, the last tool, I promise, that I explored a little bit, but I really never used it. What I love about this tool is this journal checker tool, and I think it's been kept updated, but I also am not sure, is that you can put the journal, you can put your funder, and you can put your institution, because there's policies, everyone has different policies, and it will spit out like your, what's the open access policy if combined across these three things, and is it okay to submit to this particular journal? Because some funders will require an open license, so you can kind of like maybe explore this tool when you combine all of these different institutions and see that you are in compliance, and maybe you will raise questions that you can email the institution and say like, I just want to make sure, is that what I can do or not. Okay, I think we have not many minutes left, but here is my last point, which is that my favorite thing about preprints is that I allow for community feedback. You no longer have to wait for the editor to choose you as the expert. You can, not everywhere in these services, but certainly on Free Review, you can review preprints, you can provide feedback to preprints, and it doesn't even have to be that you are an expert across everything of the manuscript. In fact, we want to encourage the fact that feedback can happen at different levels. It can happen only to a figure, and it's completely okay. And many more eyes on a publicly available piece of research are so much better, and of course I'm biased, than two pairs of eyes from someone who we don't know that has been kind of opaquely selected. This is, if we have everything that open, we can transparently and critically evaluate, is this trustworthy? And what does this other person? And it adds to that process of building knowledge upon knowledge that we talked about at the beginning. So super briefly, just want to tell you what Pre-Review is a nonprofit organization. And our mission is to bring more transparency, openness, and equity to peer review. Equity is a big piece of the change we want to see in the world, which means that providing specific additional resources for people, individual groups who have structural barriers and individual barriers, and so trying to really make it so that everyone has the option to provide feedback that is valued and constructive to preprints as the main thing, and also data sets as of recent. In the Etherpad, on the FramePad, I put some notes if you want to start reviewing today. What are the steps? And I hope you'll consider that. And this is it. Thank you very much, and feel free to email me anytime or Slack me. I'm also on the OLS Slack.
Amazing. Thank you, Daniela. We have some comments and questions in the chat if you want to address them.
Oh, thank you. So yes, thank you, Carolina. The Cielo preprint server has been operating since 2020, but the Cielo program has been around for 27 years. So Cielo preprints is one of the platforms that we actually have integration with. So if you submit a preprint to Cielo preprints, you can request feedback from Pre-Review community, and then we'll send that feedback back. I love working with Cielo. And amazing discussion today. Looking forward to next week's presentation. Good luck. So are there any more questions that I missed?
I think the last one, are the site hosts and the preprints keeping records of the people who have reviewed?
Sorry, I didn't see that. Yes, so it depends. We wish that they did it better. So we have integration. So on Pre-Review, you can review preprints from 32 preprint servers right now. So, but the other way around is not always true. So the preprint server that displays the link to the preprint, to the review, is not always true, because they would have to ingest the metadata, and not all preprint servers do it, and we can't do much about it. But some do. For example, bioRxiv, medRxiv, and Cielo preprints do show in different spaces that there is a review, that a review has happened. And we're working really hard to make more clear and give more signals to the reader that all of these objects are connected and the reviews, because we also have a way of pre-review for the authors or anyone to respond to the review. So that comment to the review also become its own object with its own DOI, that it's linked. So how do you keep track of all of these pieces and you make them that are easily findable? Because again, accessible, the fact that they're there somewhere doesn't mean that they're easily findable. And that's a big problem that we need to solve as a community.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to address also the comment from Mazume that preprints are also helpful for students applying to good universities. I would also argue that reviewing preprints is a good practice for students as well, as they get in touch with new research products and get this exercise of thinking critically about the research and learning how to give feedback. That's really important.
Yeah, thank you, Graciela. We have training programs that we host in collaboration with universities, so check out on our website. And if you would like to see if you can maybe bring one to your own institutions, let us know. And we'd love to partner with you. The other thing is that we organize these live reviews that are Zoom discussions of preprints about once a month. We're going to organize more in an open way. So maybe just join us on Slack, and you'll follow us on social media. You'll get a lot of these invitations coming up to you. So those are just opportunities to review together, to learn best practices of reviewing, maybe unlearn some old practices and bring whatever you have to bring to the community, because we're always learning from you all.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Let's close up. We have a session for feedback on the Fromapad. Please take a minute to give us feedback, to share what you learned, what worked, what didn't work. We promise that we read that and try to implement feedback as we go. And remember that next week is graduation calls, so you need to sign up for the session that you want to present, either on Tuesday or Thursday. Remember to archive your report or slides on Zenodo so we can have a record and give you credit for what you did. And there's a link for the final feedback form on the Fromapad as well. Please, please, please give us feedback. We love them. All right. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Magak, for facilitating. See you next week. Bye.
Congratulations, everyone.
Yay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.